I'm just looking for Robert of Amphew. I don't know which name is logged in on. Can we just call him, get me the phone? If you see the name Jackie, you let me know. We're just waiting for our colleagues to log on from Amphew. I need Robert. Yeah, Jackie is there. Let's have Jackie on. Allow microphone. Allow camera. Yeah, we have Jackie. So we have. Okay, I think we are good to go. We have the Executive Director for Association of Microfinance Institutions of Uganda. Jackie, can you unmute and test your microphone? Hello, Jackie. Can you unmute and test your microphone? Okay. I can make a presenter. Yes. Hello, Jackie. No. You try to unmute.
Oh, no, it's okay now. It's okay now.
It's okay.
Yeah. It has been enabled. Okay.
Okay.
I've unmuted. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay. Right. So thank you so much. I think we can now get started. We have the Executive Director, the Association of Microfinance Institutions of Uganda. We have our team from HLB Jim Roberts, who are all here. We have the team from our partners, our strategic partners on cybersecurity and fraud awareness. Summit Consulting are also here. So maybe I can give it a bit of background and context. My name's Dr. James Onyoin. I'm the managing partner of HLB Jim Roberts and also the CEO of Jim Roberts Consulting Limited, who have partnered with Summit Consulting, who are experts in cybersecurity and fraud awareness. And we have a team from Summit Consulting here. So I think for today, we basically have targeted the microfinance institutions. That's why we are working with the Association of Microfinance Institutions of Uganda. Maybe just for purposes of introduction, can I have Mustafa Mugisa? Can you just greet the audience for the beginning? Mustafa?
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Onyoin. And yes, thanks very much to Amphew for accepting us to provide an industry overview of the common cybersecurity vulnerabilities and how the industry can strengthen security, but also build what we call the digital trust. On behalf of Summit Consulting, we are happy to walk this journey with Amphew and Jim Roberts, and we look forward to a very fruitful discussion. Our team from Summit Consulting, iShield, will lead this presentation. I will be just listening in. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. So thanks for those comments. And I'm personally very delighted as well for this partnership that we're building between Jim Roberts Consulting and Summit Consulting and Association of Microfinance Institutions of Uganda. So I think at this point, I would like to invite the Executive Director, Jackie Mbabazi from Association of Microfinance Institutions of Uganda, Amphew. If you can make some opening remarks before we start this webinar. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robert. And thank you so much, HLB and Summit Consulting for doing this. For us at Amphew, we are grateful for the support to bring issues of cybersecurity at sector level, because now we know that in this interconnected world that we live in, cybersecurity is not a luxury. It is not something that you decide to do or not to do. As long as you are using technology, as long as you have become part of this digital world, it is a must. It is something that we must all start considering. It is something that we must put a lot of emphasis on. In fact, when you look at our training materials on risk management, cybersecurity is now one of the top risks in terms of risk management. If you train people and not talk about cyber risk, then you basically have missed a very huge part of the risk management sensitization and training. Just last year, sometime early last year, there is one of our members, a very big institution, that told me a story about how they lost a lot of money. They suffered financial loss because someone hacked into their system, and it almost affected it almost brought down that institution because they had not put enough emphasis on training individual employees in the institution to be more alert about cybersecurity. Because sometimes when we think about it, we think that this is the role of the IT people, the IT department, and those guys in technology. They are the ones to learn about this, but actually not at all. Now cybersecurity affects everyone. Everyone in the organization must watch out for these incidents of hackers. You can click a link that is actually going to cause a lot of problems for the institution, but you're not aware. So that is the importance that beyond us simply sending only people in the technology department to be attending these trainings, institutions, especially financial institutions, really need to look at how you build capacities of the entire staff to be able to know that they should be alert they should be alert about the possible ways that these hackers are using to get into their systems and so on, and the dangers that this can bring to their organizations. Since I am not an expert and I'll also be learning today, I don't want to speak a lot and and start contradicting myself. I also want to listen to the experts today and get to learn more about cybersecurity. And I am very eagerly awaiting to hear what you have in store for us to kickstart us on this important topic. And to once again thank you for actually accepting to do this, and to thank Robert, my colleague, who has been coordinating this training. And I'm looking forward to what you have prepared to bring forward, for us to learn from you. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Jackie, for speaking that, for giving those opening remarks. And also, I wanted to say that, I wanted to say that you have really underscored the importance of cybersecurity. Just a minute, please. Can you take that thing away? Go out. So thanks for underscoring the importance of cybersecurity. And this is really affecting mostly because most of our things are now being done online, whether it's transactions, money being transferred, all these are going through online, and anything can happen during the transmission of information. So thank you so much for highlighting this. And I also want to thank, I've seen our partners in the house. I've seen partner Julia Sokurut. Thank you so much for attending. Samuel, Ruth, and others. Thank you so much for participating in this process. So at this point, I think I would like to enable, let me see, I think I need to allow the microphone for, Okay, so I think I've allowed microphone for iShield Lab. Maybe that's where I'm going to present from. So at this point, I want to hand over to Summit Consulting to take us through the presentation. And this particular session is being recorded. In case you miss anything, we shall share with you. Just make sure we have your emails. We also are streaming it live on LinkedIn, on YouTube, for Jim Roberts, Jim Roberts YouTube, Jim Roberts LinkedIn, Jim Roberts Facebook page. Those are the media. Yes. So on those three media, this is available: YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook page. So in case you're not able to, somebody is not able to get onto Microsoft Teams, you can go to our YouTube channel, to our LinkedIn page, and to Facebook as well. So thank you so much, most appreciated. I would now like to hand over to Summit Consulting to start us through the presentation.
Thank you.
And there will be questions. There will be questions at the end, so we'll save some time so that there's interaction on the Q&A section. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Godfrey, can you please enable the screen? We wanted, if you have any expectations, any member in the audience, please feel free to post the question and answer. You can post them on the question and answer tab or in the chat. It is always very good to have those expectations. I don't know if our partners at Amphio know any person in the audience by name. If you allow us to co-host this as well with you, so that you can ask any member who has any question which you would like us to cover during this presentation, so that it is addressed. We know you are busy people and we don't want to waste your time. So I will hand over to Godfrey. I don't know why Godfrey are not sharing your screen. Has it not been enabled? Because I cannot on my side. So I think
Dr. Kindly, our machine, iShield Lab machine, will be a presenter so that we can share the screen. Thank you, Doctor.
Even this side, the share screen tab is whitened out, meaning that we don't have that. Okay, so at Summit iShield, we do threat intelligence and threat analysis, looking at the national level, sector level, and of course company level, and the final at individual level.
Go ahead, you can now share, Godfrey.
Okay, so Godfrey, I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Barnab. Thank you, Dr. James. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, you're loud and clear.
Kickstart the session. Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. Yes, as we kickstart the session, we'd be glad to receive some of the training expectations, just as our team leader on our end has put it right, so that we can make the session more interactive, but also speak to the key issues of the participants. We have prepared a custom slide, but it would be great for us to get at least like 5 key learning expectations from the participants.
Yeah, I think they can go on the Q&A. Please go on the Q&A and post your expectation. I think it's open. Use Q&A to post your expectation. Also, the chat is open. You can use one of them. Are there any expectations coming through? Okay, there is already an expectation from Mark Tumukugize. I expect you to speak about the current vulnerability among financial institutions. That's the first one I can see here. Thank you so much.
It is unfortunate that enabling screen share is taking long. I don't know. Why can't I?
No, it is enabled. It is enabled. It is enabled.
No, doctor, people are trying to share, but it is not
No,
enabled.
You see the
for
problem.
some
This
people.
is a webinar. It's not a meeting.
Ah,
it's a webinar. So,
ah,
yeah, webinar mode. It's not a meeting. Meetings can be very chaotic. You can't use them in this type of thing. This is a webinar mode. So somebody just needs to put a question, or if you want us to enable you, you tell us and we can enable you. Because we're on a webinar mode. Put up your hand. If you want to be enabled, you put up your hand, we can enable you. But we're running a webinar mode. It is not a meeting.
Okay.
Also, somebody wants to, Mark wants to hear about penetration testing. Yes, please.
Kindly just allow the screen share again because it's not yet coming through.
On which account? Which name? Godfrey.
iShield Lab.
Yes. Okay, because you need, you just need to. It's now enabled. You can go ahead.
Okay, the participants can keep sending through.
Yeah. Because some participants are sending under Q&A.
Okay.
And others under chat. So. Okay,
let me go to the Q&A. Let's pick it. You can pick it from there also. Q&A. There's one from Faith Achadu. Melissa, she's saying information on emerging AI-driven threats and attacks. She wants something about AI-driven threats and attacks. The other person, is Ivan, is asking, my expectation is to get knowledge of the weak points which hackers tend to use to cause cyber threats to financial institutions. My expectation, that's Ivan, my expectation is to get knowledge of the weak points which hackers tend to use to cause cyber threats to financial institutions. The next one is types of cyber threats under microfinance institutions. That's Paul Imbisiwe is saying types of cyber threats under microfinance institutions. Godfrey, you can also be reading the same because we all have access to the chat.
Okay, doctor. Yes.
I think those are the comments that have come through. I think you can start with that and then we get back again to comments and questions.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, participants. As we kickstart, we shall give you an overview of the current vulnerability among financial institutions because into this presentation, we have looked at the core members of AMIFU and we have mapped the vulnerabilities, but also looked at the key risks which are coming through from the financial institutions that are members with AMFU. So from this presentation, you will be able to understand what are some of the common attack surface areas, and then we shall be going deep into to understand the frequency of compromised systems and what does this mean. So this will be handled in detail. So just keep onto the call. And then somebody wants to hear about pen test. Now for this assignment, the emphasis has been on the external attack exposures of the microfinance institutions. So if you need a detailed talk about pen test, we can always you can contact us and then we'll be able to give you something which is very detailed. But however, for this discussion, we shall briefly go through over it just for you to have a good understanding. And then how cloud security impacts institutions, we shall give you an overview just for you to understand why cloud and then how do you ensure that there is good security at your company. At this time, I'm going to invite my colleague from the lab so that we can kickstart the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Chirabo. I'm from the Summit iShield Lab. So we deal primarily in cybersecurity research and development of cybersecurity capabilities at organization and enterprise level. So to start off, the iShield does security assessments and measurements of how organizations are exposed to the internet and the external attack surface. And then we work with them to dissolve or to get to the root cause of how these issues come about. So this presentation is specific to the Association of Microfinance Institutions, as well as any partners and other players in the field where the organization regulates and takes lead of the sector. So to start off the presentation, so the areas where we shall discuss, we noticed that carry the weight of cybersecurity in the organization. There's compromised credentials. There's a lot of challenge in terms of compromise that is happening within the sector. We identified quite a number of issues in that area. We shall explain more further as we go. Then the second biggest challenge we noticed is third-party risks. We noticed that almost all players are relying on third parties a lot to deliver their services. Third parties are any other parties who are not your customers, but the ones that you rely on to do your work. So some of them actually third parties, others are fourth parties. So it's a chain of service delivery that you rely on as organizations. So it does carry enough threat and risk in terms of cybersecurity, and you see as we move forward. Then the other area we noticed is the attack surface within the sector, starting from IMFIU. So there is quite a number of areas that are affected in terms of attack surface, where attackers can compromise and find ways of causing damage to the system. The last sector that we shall look at is systems that are already compromised that we've monitored and noticed from our threat intelligence capabilities. So usually when credentials are compromised, it means that there are systems that have already been compromised. So they move hand in hand. Then we shall end in with the recommendations, and then we can go to the question and answering and the further discussion of this. So the security of the sector at large is, could say they are highly vulnerable due to there's a lot of compromised credentials. On average, every organization, and we had a total of like around 14 organizations that we looked at, and on average 93 of each one of them has 93 compromised credentials. And this is a period of 1 year monitoring from November or December last year 2023 up to October 2024. So this is a high exposure rate given the core functionality, which is financial management, which is dealing with money. Having all these many credentials exposed is quite a critical take on that. These credentials usually happen, as the executive director said, most organizations are not investing in security at the start. So you find that they are leaving security as an IT problem, yet it has become a business existential problem, as she hinted at the beginning. So you find that there are many users, both employees or even general users of the mobile applications, the web applications for banking. they do not understand the weight of cybersecurity. And when a user, for example, gets their password compromised and their money transferred elsewhere, they are not going to blame they are not going to blame their own not understanding of security, but they will blame the system of the organization. So the number of compromises is a lot in terms of credentials that are exposed. If on average of 14 you have 93, then it becomes a lot of exposure in terms of credentials. So most of these from our iShield report, we've noticed that most cases or even intrusions that we've looked at, involve credential abuse. So credential abuse can be either deliberately users sharing credentials or them being stolen through compromise, as we've shown, or any of the combination of above. As you can see, 33% of intrusions is always going to lost or stolen credentials. So cyber actors or threat actors do not need to even find vulnerabilities. If they have credentials, all they need to do is to just log in and they can access whatever systems are affected, whether it is mobile banking, internet banking, or any of these, because we noticed some of the findings that we saw. For this question, we are not going to go into the bigger technical details, but some of the credentials we saw, for example, are for organizations like YO that enable most organizations to pay. These are the integrators. So if I have access to credentials of integrators of a given microfinance institution or a banking institution, it is one that allows back-end operations of payments. So it can allow me to transfer money at a more higher level. So you see how critical some of these exposures are. Then the reason why we say this is critical, as I've just said, is the financial motives. So the motives are high, and that's why you see we are seeing increase in terms of compromises. We are pretty sure that within the last month, there have been 2 compromises at financial institutions, and they are all as a result of credential mismanagement that has come up. So you find that the credentials were stolen and compromised, and then they're used to transfer money, because both cases have a total of around 1 point, I think it's around 3.8 billion to be exact, from the figures we know. So usually that's why credentials are a bigger threat right now. And then once credentials are compromised, obviously the next step is you're going to have a hard time to track down who is using them for what. So most times we've seen that due to loss of credentials, there's loss of revenue. Usually the banks and the staff involved are terminated. You find that the clients will lose trust into the organization. Once they hear that you've lost money, they can no longer trust, because they bank with you on the basis of trust. So if you don't have enough trust in your own systems, the challenges and the impact is quite high. And this is what we've observed, that every time there is compromise in an organization, money is lost at a high value. So it's a bigger threat that the sector is facing at large. So the other thing to notice is that it's hard to recover money that has already been lost. As you see, the amount of money lost by police is a lot of money, but then they can only recover not even a quarter of it. So it is a challenge that when you lose money, you're most likely losing it for good, and you're going to find it very hard to recover. So when we go to the second biggest challenge we noticed during our research and assessment, we find that there are so many, actually most organizations, you see, we did a total an assessment of 14 organizations, but around 8 of them rely completely and mostly on third parties to deliver their services. But as you see in the graph, we noticed that all of those now, the highest is an organization that has 22 credentials compromised by that belong to third parties. These include enterprise management systems, enterprise payment systems, and this is a bigger threat. Some of these actually we've noticed they are not even in Uganda. You find that some of them were compromised from India, and these are people who are managing the systems that the bank uses, or they are building them. Some of them are managed in South Africa. So there are quite a lot of variation that your third party is compromised from India or South Africa, and that you are in Uganda, and it leads to loss of finances and revenue. So this is a very big risk area that the sector has to deal with at length. There has to be mechanisms, and it has to pass regulations on cybersecurity regarding third parties and supply chain. It's becoming the most critical area of compromise that happens now, especially because some of these organizations don't have in-house capability, so they end up outsourcing much of the work, but they do not take the due diligence and the necessary requirements of feeding in cybersecurity into third parties. We've been to like 3 or 4 incident response cases whereby the third party of the mobile banking application is in, let's say, Nairobi, Kenya, and you cannot get logs, you cannot do any form of incident response because they focused on functionality and they forgot that security is a critical functional area. So they did not enable certain things. They rushed to market to just enable features which endangered the security of the application. Now, when compromise happened, it was very hard to justify. For example, they had poor planning in terms of digital forensic capabilities and incident response. So these third parties have to be verified. They have to meet certain levels of cybersecurity in order to facilitate the growth the industry needs. So we find that it is becoming very challenging in that area. And those two areas lead to a lot of challenges because they lead to, for example, when attackers find the vulnerabilities in terms after they hit that kind of, they find that customers are more vulnerable, and then they find that the third parties and employees, this is where the emails and the threat of social engineering becomes more critical. As you see, those 3 areas are still topping what we would call vulnerabilities. The modern threat landscape and vulnerabilities and exposure changes dynamically. 10 years before, you used to look for only vulnerabilities which were more of technical, affecting technical systems. Nowadays, you find that the vulnerabilities start from the human beings. You find that social engineering is becoming the biggest thing that the attackers use to do initial access. It's very easier for me to force someone to give me credentials or to find credentials of a user that has been already social engineered and then just log into the banking system. So than finding a 0-day in a banking application, so, or even in the firewall. So you can have the firewalls and you can invest in all the other technical security, but then you forget that the exposure starts from the human. As long as the human beings are not fully aware of their responsibility in the chain of security, it is going to be very hard for the sector and the players within to manage security. As you see, we've come this far, but we've not talked about technical vulnerabilities. And this is information that we discover from the dark web, from monitoring the depth of the internet. You find that there are compromised. So we take that. We also noticed through certain assessments that we did internally that these vulnerabilities still prove a challenge. From our issued report, we've had a number of assessments in financial institutions, and we noticed that they still have most common vulnerabilities that are affecting them, and they are critical in terms of what the impact that they bring. We find that it's easier to get access when you find vulnerabilities internally, because some organizations have invested heavily in external security and firewalls and other things and email security. But then when you go inside their networks, you find that it is a soft core. It's very easy to pick their systems apart through these vulnerabilities, which are like 3 or 4 years old, which is an issue that feeds into lack of security management and patching. So those are areas where we see. Then emails have become, as we discussed, they are the new attack path. The emails and the identity is the new and the easier way to get into an organization. So it's easier to, you see, emails and identity take much of the lion's share, which is around 70%. So you find that most compromises that we've noticed that are happening within the microfinance sector are because they have a lot of email exposure and identity and authentication challenges that lead to compromise of credentials, or even compromise of systems that are critical to production of within production systems, core banking systems and such. Then web applications come about because much of what is being, the technology that is implemented is either an API or it's a web application. So you find that it's becoming a huge threat that these web applications are being compromised at the higher rate, because it's easier. You used to have these applications internal within the networks of the institutions, but now because you want people to access them through mobile money, you want them to be accessed through the internet and the web, you'll notice that you are exposing these systems externally now. So the attackers are always watching out for them, and given that they have credentials or even the exploit within the web applications, because most organizations, they deliver these applications and APIs without even doing security assessments. Even the development, they don't know and understand the development pipeline, how these applications are built. They don't get to, to bake security within them. They just rush to market to make sure that they have a product somewhere, and that's pretty much it. So by the time they realize that they have lost money, that's when they go back to being reactive. After they have lost money, they go back and then they come to us to do a security assessment, or they come to us to do an incident response, when these are things that should have been done before the implementation of the application and its components. Then infrastructure is mostly refined storage. You find that some organizations are using cloud storage and other external storage services. So they leave them exposed, and you find critical banking information. There are organizations where we found some of the backups of the whole core database in the microfinance and the fintech sector. So it's a critical challenge that there's a lot of fast-moving technology within the sector, but there is very little regard in terms of cybersecurity that we notice, and it's going to become existential. We believe that there are few organizations that are going to lose money, which is equivalent to their revenue, and they will probably file for bankruptcy. It has happened already within the other sectors we've noticed, because cybersecurity has become a business issue, a business risk component, a business existential threat. It's no longer an IT challenge. So it's something that has to be noted. So as I said before, when credentials are compromised and we find them from our monitoring capabilities, we notice that they are a result of mostly being compromised systems. So on average, every microfinance organization out of the 14 has roughly 45 systems that are compromised at least within the period of a year that we've monitored and created this report within. So you find that the highest compromised within the year has a total of 393 systems that have been compromised, and the lowest is at least one system within a year. So at least every organization has one compromise a year. So that's how these things happen. So the compromise that we are talking about is, you find people who are trying to download pirated software, because some of the screenshots we notice come when someone is trying to download pirated software. They are trying to to disable even the security system. They want to watch a certain movie, so they go to the torrents. Why are you doing that? And then the highest trend we are noticing nowadays is the people want to download probably YouTube videos. So they go to these internet sites which have a lot of pop-ups. So one ends up clicking on a pop-up, then they install accidentally, they install what are called info stealing malware. So info stealing malware will do, as the name says, it will steal critical information in terms of credentials. So it will collect your browsing cookies and all your cloud sessions, and which are stored in the cookies. It will collect your usernames. You collect usernames, it will collect passwords. So you find that the highest organization, some of the one that we noticed, you see there are like 3 or 4 who have more than 20 compromises in a year. So it's a high number for the size of the employees in terms of microfinances. So it's a huge risk, but also this also now feeds back into the challenges in terms of endpoint security and management, because you find that some of these systems, as we've noticed them, they do not even have endpoint security like antiviruses, and that's why they get compromised. Due to that, you also see that due to this high number, there's lack of, because most of these are repeated compromises. You find that an organization is compromised in January, then February, another user is compromised, then in March. So you find that the organization is going to keep fighting symptoms, and they don't have a root cause of, endpoint security. And then incident response is very lacking, because if you have these repeated challenges, you're failing to understand the pattern of why the compromises are happening constantly. So there is a huge challenge in the sector in terms of effective security management and endpoint capabilities. That's why these compromises are happening. And these are systems that have already been compromised. By the time we get this data and this monitoring from our threat intelligence sources, there's 100% confident that the systems have been compromised. We can attribute them to the organization because we can see the IP addresses that belong to the organization and know that these are theirs. So as I said, some of these include third parties, because most organizations have third parties in South Africa, they have third parties in Kenya, they have third parties in India who are managing some of these. So you find that the system that is even compromised for someone who is in India, and they have access to the core banking. So all of these credentials are collected, and it is direct access. If I'm a threat actor, I'm going to get direct access to your core banking. And then the organization, the most saddening feature and fact is that the organization currently is not in the know. They do not know that these credentials have been compromised already. So out of those, you find that all of these are high-ranking findings and areas of exposure. And they carry more the high and the medium, because sometimes medium risks elevate to high if you combine them well enough. So, for example, if I find API compromise of an API of a payment provider that belongs to an organization, it might be that it affects a certain area, but if I keep adding it to operationalize it as a threat actor, I then gain high return. So there are so many high findings as well as medium findings, and you see there are also critical ones. So as long as you have critical and high findings, It means these are things that should have been settled like a long time ago, or some of them should be cleared already on the desk. But the fact that most organizations do not carry out security assessments, they don't have that guidance. That's where we talk about the sector lead, the association, to make sure that at least these guidelines, not even just guidelines, they become mandatory things to do. When you look at the other, for example, Bank of Uganda is now telling financial institutions they need to have threat intelligence. There's need to do continuous assessments. You no longer cannot do an assessment once a year and you think you have security at hand. When the people who are trying to break into your systems are doing it every single day, you can't do it once a year. You're going to have a lot of blind spots and lack of visibility into these other operations. So these things should become continuous. There's a trend to what's called continuous threat exposure and management, whereby it's something we do actually at iShield. This is the same kind of thing. We look at systems of different critical areas of different organizations, and you keep seeing how exposed they are on a given, like a weekly basis or monthly basis, depending on how you determine that in terms of agreement and working with them. So it's very high that you can mostly solve these issues if you see them and you can work on them. But if you are blind to them and you take a whole year to look at your vulnerabilities and exposure, then you can hardly say that you have an upper hand on security in the organization and the sector at large. So the areas of concern that we noticed is that, as we talked about, we rated this out of 10. So out of the highest the number, the more critical the field is. So compromise assessment and incident response is a big challenge in the sector. There are so many systems belonging to the different organizations that are compromised, and this is repeated. We notice things that happen in January, you see the same things happening in February. So after 12 months, you see the same things reoccurring. So that means there's a lot of gaps within incident response, and things like the procedures, the regulations also are not working, because some of these people are not reporting these issues. If they report and there's information sharing, you find that you might find a root cause solution to why the compromises are happening, but they are not sharing this information. And it's not that they do not want to, of course, most of them do not want to share because of trust issues and sensitivity. But then you're being taken apart one by one by the threat actors, because if I compromise institution A using the same tactics and techniques, then I go and compromise institution B using the same tactics. If this information had been shared earlier, that threat actor and the tactics would have ceased to have much value, because most organizations would have been aware of them and they would have put measures in place to stop that. So there is lack of information sharing, which that information should come from incident response as well as compromise assessment. But then organizations, one, do not share, and two, they do not know that they have been compromised. We are in position, we are doing that, and we are trying to change the industry, the way they approach security. So we are producing these reports at a given threshold with our partners, HLB, so that the critical sectors and the leaders, the association, for example, in the Microfinance, the association itself, if they produce these reports per week, per month, you find that there will be more awareness of what is happening and what threats are being affecting, which threats are affecting the sector at large. Then the banks and the institutions under can work effectively to make sure that these things are worked on and these exposures are closed, as well as putting root cause measures in place. Then, as we talked about, exposure management is a big challenge that most organizations do not know their exposure. They do not know that they have compromised credentials lying around because there are so many credentials that belong to organizations, and you find that people reuse the same credentials. So having access to one username and password can have access to so many things. We've seen weak passwords, we've seen reused passwords. You find that a user has one password for like seven applications, which is a big challenge in terms of managing identity and access. Then you find that these vulnerabilities, since most organizations have never even done a security assessment, they do not even know what vulnerabilities and exposure they have. So the more, every time you implement applications, you increase your attack surface, and which is actually happening, that most organizations in the sector are rapidly deploying technology. They are bringing about different applications and they are adding them to their inventory. And most of them do not even keep track of them. So every time that you add an application to your inventory, you are increasing your exposure and you are increasing your attack surface. So most of these organizations do not have capabilities to look into these exposures. So it's a big challenge. Then configuration management is that configuration is how you configure your systems, how securely you configure them in the first place before you even put them up and expose them. So as we discuss, most 8 out of 14 organizations mostly rely on third parties, which means the people who manage their systems are not directly seated within their premises, and they are not in their own either data centers or their own controlled servers. These are either cloud external systems that you have people who manage them. They are responsible for your security. They are responsible for your data security to make sure the data is governed well, their backups and all of that. So we find that some of these do not pay attention to secure configuration management. They expose certain systems that are supposed to be testing systems as shadow IT. They have remote access that is exposed, that given the credentials, you find that we find AnyDesk, we find TeamViewer credentials that have been already exposed and they directly lead to access within organizations. So configuration management becomes an issue, and this is something that the association should define clear, strict guidelines that should be abided and mandatory, that configuration management and remote access are critically managed and they should be taken as such. So since the association doesn't have that clear mandate of how organizations within the sector should carry on to do configurations of their systems, it is now everyone is on their own and they rely on their own expertise. And in security, you are as secure as your configuration management capability. So if you are not securely configuring and managing your systems, then security issues are going to show up one way or another. Then identity access and management is a critical factor that we've talked about. You find that there are very few organizations out of the 14. You find that there are 4 who have what's called multi-factor authentication in terms of their externally facing systems. The rest rely on either what the third party provides, and it's a challenge. Nowadays, with all these credentials that we've talked about, if only what you rely on is a username and password, then there are going to be security risks that are impactful, very impactful. So nowadays, that's why you see most secure providers in terms of these services are mandatory using multi-factor authentication. Because if I have your username and password, I can easily log in. But if there is another factor that is enforced by default that you should have on most systems that these organizations are using, then it should make identity and access more easier. So we find that the biggest challenge is that there is no multi-factor authentication or even modern authentication, things like single sign-on. We find that a user has 7, 8 credentials and systems that they need to log in. That means that they are going to be forced to use one password to access this. But with things like single sign-on and multi-factor authentication, you can have one credential that can allow you to access like 7 applications at once. So when systems are being designed and when these organizations are evaluating what products and applications they need to bring on board, they should look at the identity part critically, because it will allow them to stop much of the credentials that are being compromised and left around, because they will reduce the burden on the users and make it design better systems that make sure that the identity is protected. Then the last two sections is the defense assessment. From what we've seen, you find that there are no organizations that have done defense assessments. They have not looked at how our defense systems, because buying these firewalls and endpoint products and other security products is one thing, but making sure that they are effective at what they are doing is another. It's like having a guard you have at home who has to take care of the gate and open and close, but you find that even if he's there, he just opens for everyone at will. So the effectiveness and the utilityness of the guard is reduced. So we noticed that even the systems that were compromised that have the endpoints, they are either out of date, they are not assessed how well they do perform their job. So that's what a cyber defense assessment is all about. So when we do them, we usually test your defenses to see how they react and how effective are they to catching such threats. Then the last part is also, we call them security assessments, but someone at the beginning call them penetration testing. So we like to call it a security assessment because we do a whole of organization approach. Penetration testing usually focuses on the technical aspects of a system. So it assumes that you are testing if a system can be penetrated or it can be bypassed and broken into. But we've realized, as I said, the dynamics of security is changing at a faster pace. So you find that even if you have these unpenetratable systems, you have other vectors that do allow to bypass all that investment into those systems. So we usually do a whole security assessment that goes and tests the people, the processes that you use to manage these systems, and the technology itself. So those are the areas that we noticed are of concern. So now we internally have been notified that there's a whole other technical report that has more detailed findings, but it's quite sensitive. That will be there will be dialogue between the association, HLB and Summit, to see how they avail this document on certain grounds. But to give you a hint into the findings that are there, as you see, one of the critical exposures is user credentials, the employees, then corporate accounts, and then you have customer accounts. So that is the biggest thing. You find that an organization has you find that the organization has almost 1,000 customers and consumer accounts which have been compromised. It's a critical challenge that has to be taken at high risk. Then you find that there are quite a number of corporate accounts that lead to internal applications. For example, email, identification, and other things are compromised here. So it's a critical area of compromise. So as you can see, this is the association itself. We did this because, so you see, the three here, what we call the stealers, is that there are three systems that have already been compromised that are either associated with the Association of Microfinance Institutions of Uganda. And you see the applications that are affected, PMT, then training, and then those are the two. And you see the date this is September 2024. So you find that even you see the password strength is medium. We've blurred out the users so that they are not affected, and the machines, as well as the IP. But you see that we are constantly looking out for these systems that are being compromised. So this is what an employee and compromise looks like. So you find that someone used this and from a system that is already compromised, and it led to the compromise of these credentials. So to summarize some of the technical other findings, You see now, for example, the organization itself, the association has 16 compromised credentials that are already due to compromise of external systems that the users are registered to. Then you see that you have, for example, Goldmine has 6 compromised users who are mostly employees. You have Letsego, which has almost 100. And you have Pride Microfinance, which has a lot of systems and users compromised. So it brings about a challenge that these organizations, this is a hint we've just tried to summarize to put more context into what we talk about when we say credential compromise. So you find that the other technical report goes into detail of how and which systems are compromised, and then it can be used to do further incident response as well as investigations into where these compromises are happening. So you find that this is one of the organizations we sealed it out, but with the most recent exposure is 24 days ago. And you see there is a total of 1,000 compromised credentials plus, which shows that 81% is password reuse. So you find that the biggest challenge now is that if I have a password from out of this information, I have a high chance that I'm going to use it somewhere else within the organization. So you find that there's high vulnerability and exposure. So this is something that is critical. And when we say critical, it is quite high. And then you see that some of them, the challenge is the security of the passwords. Their passwords are weak. You find that they rarely even have industry standard. You find that most of them have 6 characters, 8 characters, 10 characters. Now the industry standard is 12 characters minimum. You should have 12 character passwords. And then even to even not worry much about passwords, there is a recommendation to use what are called passphrases. So a passphrase is something that you know. For example, I go to work every day is a passphrase. It's very long, it's hard to crack, and you can utilize it as a password, and this is more effective because you can remember it easily. And we rarely see that being used within the organization. So that's the depth we went. As I said, there are more depth. There is a more deeper technical report that can be shared further after dialoguing between the partners at large at a higher level. But going forward, this is what we recommend at a high level without going into other technical details. Closing unnecessary remote access is very critical. We've noticed that there are exposed remote access systems, remote access control systems of different capabilities that are exposed. And because you see there are so many credentials of these organizations, it's the compromise just happens as easy as finding these credentials and logging in. And that leads to compromise of an organization. Then patching systems is a critical factor. Patching also includes securely configuring these systems. You have systems that are internet facing and they are not updated, they're not securely configured. It's a big challenge. And we would like to advise you to highly make sure that these systems are patched. The reason we do is that we keep monitoring these weekly. We have our methodology is that we collect data every other month to inform us of the changes in different sectors. So we do it from ISP level because your ISPs provide you internet. They're the ones who give you the IP addresses. So we monitor those, and then we monitor the dark web to find any mention of Ugandan-based organizations, their credentials, their compromised systems. We find that there are people who have already compromised your systems, and we do that. So patch the systems because we noticed the software installed on these systems is not patched. Some of them have operating systems that have not even been patched for a given period of time. So it's a very critical challenge. Then we talked about multi-factor authentication and passwords. As you've noticed, the passwords are weak. The passwords are not enough. You need to have multi-factor authentication. Then we talked about single sign-on. Single sign-on will help you reduce the burden of passwords because a user would have one password that is required to access other systems. But we find the user has 8 applications to log into every day, and they are forced to use one single password. So when that password is compromised, the same convenience the user has is the same convenience that the threat actor is going to have in terms of compromising those systems. Then you can rely on us to monitor the dark web to stay ahead of such threats, or you can find services that monitor and allow you to monitor the dark web to stay ahead of when are you compromised, how have you been compromised, then how do you do incident response and forensics from there, and then how do you make sure that you mitigate such entry points. So thanks for that. I think we can go now into the Q&A section of furthering the discussion.
Thank you very much for this very, very enlightening talk. But maybe what I would request you, is it possible for you to go to the Q&A and pick up any comments or questions that we can deal with straight away before we ask the audience to indicate that they want to speak, and then we allow them to speak?
Okay, so let me actually do that.
At least to check if all the expectations have been met.
Okay, sir, let me do that now.
Thank you.
So I'm not seeing questions. I don't know if my chat area is the one that doesn't have. So yes, compromise of suppliers is very, very critical, even at not to the whole sector, because most organizations in this country, we are building the human capital to build software at a slow pace, if any, actually. So even the human capital and to manage these systems is not as, there's a shortage of IT capability and talent in the country. So what we are forced to do is to rely on external, already established capabilities. For example, most of you notice that you go to Kenya, Nairobi for software development. We have organizations that you find that one organization is creating software for like 7 organizations. So compromising the one Kenyan organization leads me to have access to 7 Ugandan microfinances because they use the same infrastructure, they use the same backend. So the authority has to make sure that they mandate this. Cybersecurity, for example, to show you how critical this is, in the US, there is a whole presidential directive that dictates how supply chain and third-party security is supposed to be handled within government institutions because they know they have been compromised and it is very, very hard to detect that your third party has been compromised, because even the ones we've noticed, they are not going to, they hardly accept that there is compromise, and they will not give you a full after effect assessment report of what happened and how they are going to mitigate it. And then in the meantime, you would have lost revenue already and such kind of things. So it's a very, very critical area that has to be taken seriously, because you have almost 75% of the sector players in the microfinance, even banking at large, they are relying on third parties. The third parties include fintechs, they include the software provision, the ones that provide software, they can be the cloud services are third parties. All of these are third parties. So compromising one leads to you having a breach which you did not have on your cards or incidentally see. So in most cases also remote access, someone talks about remote access like any desk. It is becoming a very critical area that most compromises are happening, because nowadays what happens is that even the threat actors, they recruit insiders, and then they give them machines that have remote access, or even users just giving away remote access through these applications. So because most of these applications, most of the organizations, as we've talked about, they do not have endpoint security. Endpoint security includes antivirus, endpoint detection and response. It includes application allow listing and application height listing, where you only allow applications that are supposed to run. So, for example, there's a breach we responded to that included that there was any disk installed on a system that should not be having any disk at all. So if they had application whitelisting in place, they would have blocked such a threat. So it's very critical to have these endpoint protections in place. There is a whole suite of them that any organization can pick and use according to how it affects them and operations. So it's a critical area. So remote access and then supply chain and third parties are very critical that you need to be, because even these third parties end up having remote access in your environment. So once they are compromised, the threat actors pivot from their environment to whatever systems are internal to you, because you already trust them and you give them access to your environment. So that's what happens. So he talked about someone here, Paul, mentioned the manufacturing of flash memory, which stores many pass keys instead of using passwords on 4 or 5 sites. So this is where single sign-on comes in. The cost of manufacturing might be a stake higher for the industry because they are already players. There is what we call YubiKeys, but then there are more technologies. There's what's called single sign-on that is being built into most modern authentication systems. So you only have one credential, which is protected by multi-factor authentication, that you can integrate any other applications within. So for example, your core banking, your other systems. So when that person tries to access it when they don't have the right single sign-on token, they cannot access. So single sign-on will solve much of these issues because it is critical. As we've noticed from our technical data, you find that one user has access to like 10 systems and they end up using 2 passwords in general. So compromising that 1 or 2 passwords leads me to have access to 10 systems. So the presentation will be provided. That is Rajesh. The presentation will be provided for you. So thanks, Ivan. We are glad that your expectation has been responded to. So Philium talks about print and domain controller threats. Yes, internally, most of you, the organizations, you have critical issues in terms of Active Directory. There are many issues and CVEs that are bound to affect the printing capability within Active Directory environments. We've literally been to assessments where you walk into, and then once you connect to the network, within the first 10 to 20 minutes, you already have domain admin access because of these issues. And these come from configuration management, securely configuring and hardening the systems. So I am not going to delve deeper into the technical details because I think the audience might not like much the technical depth, but I'm glad you can pass by. We at Block B and Tinder Complex. We can come and have a discussion. We have a lab. We can go through most of these things and we can have actually sessions. We are planning to be having sessions where organizations like the microfinances can come over on a weekend. They can bring their IT team and IT people or any interested parties. And then we can have a 1 or 2 hour session where we talk about technical configuration, securing systems and what is entailed. And we plan on making them free of access to network and to create a more viable environment. So we can have that discussion at a deeper level. But yes, the domain controllers, we find that there is a lot of issues in terms of Active Directory security, and internally it creates it is the mother of all challenges, because Active Directory and the domain controllers is a very detailed topic that feeds into identity. So it's an identity and access management challenge that is very much a bigger challenge. So you find that the permissions are assigned at will, You find that there are so many accounts that have privileged permissions. You find there's a lot of password reuse. The same passwords you find externally, when you go internally into an organizations, you find that they're even already domain admin and they're a regular user, so it becomes a security challenge. Then these printer issues are just system hardening, because some of these are left on by default with Microsoft. So Microsoft also bears the burden, but they are a big organizations. A big organization, you are hardly going to coerce them. Even the US government is trying to force them to make things which are secure by default, but it is, it's becoming a big thing. So Fatima, if I said the name right, likes to know about the roles of different teams in cybersecurity, like red team, blue team, purple team, for the security of our digital assets. So to answer you, the blue team, I'm going to start with the blue team. The blue team is responsible for defending your environment. Those are your IT administrators who deal in defending and configuring your firewalls, configuring your data access and the roles and permissions in Active Directory. That is the blue team. They are responsible for two things: configuring systems securely, and two, monitoring these systems and responding to whatever monitoring threats they see that pop up. Then the red team is the guys who want to break into your environment. These are the threat actors. For example, people who get your usernames and passwords and they try them on every other system. Those are the bad guys. The red team are the guys who are simulated as the bad guys. Now, the purple team is a combination of two. When you get red and blue and you mix them, you get purple. So usually it is a controlled engagement. We usually do purple team assessments. So we play the red team and your team plays the blue team. So we try as much to break in. And once we break in, we go and sit with the blue team and tell them we were able to access system X. Did your logs detect this? Did you catch this kind of technique? Did you catch this attack? So that combination of red and blue team is what's called purple team. So the purple team is meant to make sure to enforce your defenses. It is a very controlled engagement. So it's akin to an advanced pen test, if I could say that. So usually we test the security. Once we break in, we come to meet your blue team. It's usually in one room where we all play, we all sit. So when we achieve a certain level of access, we ask them if they're able to detect. If they are not able to detect, we sit down together and then we see why they did not detect, and then they implement the defense for that. So the purple team is the continuous assessment of your security, and it is the defense assessment here. You see here on the slide that I talked about, the cyber defense assessment is what's called the purple teaming engagement. So we use that to test. So the red team falls within the security assessment. So we have that kind of capability around there. So the contacts are going to be shared in detail. They will be here. This is Summit. There is, I think, also for HLB, they are going to be there as well. The website and everything will be shared as well. So Jamila says, I highlight the difference between cybersecurity and information security. So cybersecurity encompasses everything from cyber comes from technology, from a technology perspective. So cyber means anything that uses technology and is networked. So cyber means network technology. So cybersecurity means security for cyber or network connected systems. Now, information security is specifically targeting information. So data security falls within information security. So your information systems, your communication system, that's information security. Anything that you use to manage information. Information comes from data and well as human interaction. So that's where information security is. So the difference is that information security is a subsection within cybersecurity. So cybersecurity is the whole encompassing from technology, every other technology, from your core banking to your phone, to your routers, to your monitoring devices and smart devices that you have, that's all cybersecurity. But information security deals with the information that goes through these systems. So any information like the network communications, the data that is generated, and all of that is what's the small specific, that's information security. I hope it answers your question. So yes, Rajesh, you will receive the email. They will send the presentation to you. Then actually Fatima answered it as well. So those are the questions. Then we can go to the other questions that come from the crowd.
Hello? Yes, doctor? You're mute?
Yes, sorry. I missed you a bit. What was your last request?
No, we can now get any other more questions from the participants.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for covering all those other comments that have come in. Just to assure members, so long as you registered, I know you registered using your emails, the presentation will be shared to all your emails. We'll also share the recording because this session is being recorded. It is also available on our various social media, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. So it's live, so it's already there anyway. But we'll share the links through the emails that you've used for registering. So thank you so much. So can we hear if there are any? I'm just looking around now. If there are any questions still in the chat, you can also put your hand up. Then I can enable you to speak. That is also a good option. If you put your hand up, I can enable you to speak. Our team can enable you to speak if you put your hand up. And also the other thing, of course, if you don't get the email or website, just go to any of your social media like Google and search for HLB Jim Roberts, search for Summit Consulting. You'll be able to get all our contact details. So that should be okay. Okay, I don't see any hand up. Members, if you see a hand up and I've not seen, let me know. There is another question, I think, coming in.
Doctor, there are two hands. There
are two hands.
Doctor?
Okay.
Yes,
please.
There is Stephen and also there is Joseph.
Okay, let me start with Joseph then. Thank you. I can allow you to speak. Joseph, go ahead and speak. You are enabled. Joseph, go ahead to speak. I've enabled both Joseph and Stephen, so whoever is ready can start and then the other can follow. Please enable your microphone.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for the presentations. My name is Joseph Omoding. I am the Executive Director for Uganda Consumer Lenders Association. So I actually sit on most of the microfinance institutions dealing in lending. I have two questions. Question number one is that most of the microfinance institutions that I oversee are still having limited resources. So the enforcing internal controls seems to be having demanding a huge expense on their side. And I wanted just to find from you what could be a relatively cheaper means of enforcing internal controls to guard against the cybersecurity threats. That is question number one. Question number two is the artificial intelligence that seems to be taking the world over. What role do you think artificial intelligence can play in terms of helping microfinance institutions come against the cybersecurity threats? Thank you. Mustafa, you are speaking, but looks like we are not getting you. You seem to be. Mustafa, we can't get, I see your mouth is moving, but we can't get you.
Okay, Doctor, any other more questions? Can we take the one of Stephen so that we can respond to Mr. Joseph and also Stephen together with Fatima? Doctor, you on mute?
Sorry. So who else do you want me to enable? Who else do you want me to enable? I don't see the hands
Stephen.
up. Stephen is already enabled. Stephen is already enabled long ago.
Okay, Stephen can come in.
Stephen, you can speak. Stephen, are you with us? Hello, Stephen? Your microphone is enabled. Can you speak, Stephen?
Okay, Doctor, also our team lead on our side has also raised the hand. I think you can enable him to speak.
Okay. Okay, let me see. That is Mr. Strategy. Is that the one you are using?
Yes.
Okay, let me see. How come I don't see him, Mr. Strategy? Are you seeing him?
Yeah, I made him a presenter.
Okay, you have been made a presenter. Can you go ahead, Mustafa?
Yes. No. Thank you very much. And I want to thank my team for the fantastic insights. Somehow I went offline, and that's why I think I was muted. I don't know the specific questions that have been asked that require or asking. What we know is that cybersecurity is an evolving threat, and increasingly it also requires the right skills at the board. I don't know how Amphio is empowering directors of institutions to gain the skills to be able to ask the right questions to management. But also it requires empowering executive, including the directors and the company secretaries, on writing reports that are relevant and create action that is required at the board level. Because we have done body evaluation assessments, and we have looked at the kind of board papers submitted to the board and the briefings to the board on cybersecurity. So you find that these briefings are very inadequate. So having security require fixing both the hard and the soft systems. As the presentation has demonstrated, you cannot totally rely on, for example, the IT, because cybersecurity is no longer an IT problem. It is a business problem. If it is a business problem, it requires the 360 approach to managing it, from finance to marketing up to technology and the board. Why do we say marketing? You want to make sure that people appreciate that there maybe company emails should not be used to open social media accounts. Why? Because then they become part of the attack surface mapping, and they can easily be used to compromise the systems that they use to compromise. So these simple basics are very important, and they need to go across. We have seen directors who have confidential sensitive information access their online system for board papers on the cloud using public Wi-Fi. So you are basically putting the entire compromise of intellectual property of that particular company to risk of being exploited. Now imagine you are getting the confidential minutes of the board and all the discussions and all the papers and briefings about the board of a given bank or financial institution on their portal. Why? Because you just used an insecure network. It is like having the president or any senior public interest person move in Chikubo at night without any security guard. So when they put a ring of security around that, that's what we call a VPN, a virtual private network. Much as you're using a public road, you have an added security profile on it, so that protects you. But now if the person identity is known and then is moving alone at night, now imagine if you saw, for example, say Museveni or Trump is just walking downtown, what is going to happen? So that's why they have to make a VPN of the physical VPN sort of by putting that kind of security. So thank you very much, and we look forward to more conversations. We have other talks which we give, which we are going to begin with partnership with Bank of Uganda, ongoing monthly security briefings, which give state of cybersecurity on a monthly basis. Because at our lab, as Daniel rightly showed you, we are always collecting data on a daily basis, looking at the evolving threat landscape. And our data collection is at a country high-level ISP, not only in Uganda, but regionally, because this is basically public data which everybody can see, because that's how technology has been configured. If you are communicating here to abroad, you are using an IP address, an internet protocol, there is a chain by which your message is going. So we look at analyzing those kind of points or access points to be able to map the kind of traffic that is coming and the one which is bad or which is good. So the briefings, once they begin happening in partnership with Bank of Uganda, will a heightened threat state of awareness about practical. Because for us in Uganda, we want to, in our partnership with the HLB Jim Roberts, to, for lack of a better word, democratize awareness of cybersecurity, empower people to understand so that they don't spend too much money when they shouldn't, because we have been called to respond to incidents where somebody has just done an audit or they have done an external security assessment, and then you find the work they got was more of audit report instead of a thorough cybersecurity assessment. And so you find that they give substandard work because the client themselves does not know what good looks like. So our ongoing trainings is to give you at least a minimum awareness. Now, we have done this presentation for free by just doing an assessment. Now, imagine if you tell us, okay, you come and do our organization and see how much we're exposed. So this means that you have got an understanding minimum, what you would expect from that kind of external assessment. Now, what we have done is we have not proved exploit because that is now illegal. Proving exploit means that you give us official permission. And we would like, for example, for Pride Microfinance, where you have seen there is a lot of credentials that are exposed, they need to be proved exploited. You prove exploit. For organizations like which my colleague spoke to, as you saw, it is very important that now the AMFU in its own umbrella body interest to cause the discussion, because security is now more about proactive other than reactive. And that's why even in the past, boards have been talking about oversight. No, boards are no longer doing oversight of anything. Boards today have to do what we call foresight, because foresight is being proactive, not going to cry over spoiled milk and do postmortem. You have to anticipate and prevent, other than react and respond, because reaction and respond causes a lot of reputational loss, is very expensive, and causes people to lose jobs. So therefore, a bot cannot be effective if it is just going to be reacting and responding. I beg you to submit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mustafa. And also, I wanted to add that the same arrangements we are making with the Bank of Uganda, with the Uganda Bankers Association, we can still discuss with Jackie and the team at Association of Microfinance Institution. We can also come up with some kind of regular briefings on the status of the industry, and then working with your members, we can help to really set up very good defenses so that your members are not so much exposed. This is something we're happy to do, but it is something we can discuss maybe after this meeting. We are open to collaboration, to partnerships, to working with your members to make sure we improve the landscape of cybersecurity and fraud awareness in this country. And of course, where your members need also detailed training, we have detailed programs for training on cybersecurity, so we can actually skill up. The more skilled the people manning the systems are, the better for all of us. Because when the thing hits, it hits all of us as a country or as a region. Thank you. I think I take it back to the technical team. I think you had something you wanted to explain.
I just wanted to add something, yes. Which is small, because you see, for one of the biggest costs in many financial institutions, and which is causing less competitiveness, is the high cost of technology, but most importantly, the high cost of cybersecurity. So what we can do is, in addition to the internal cybersecurity capabilities which are already present, we can support by working with the existing investments to make them more effective, because we are seeing people spending a lot of money based on what the regulator has recommended, and then you find that they think about it as buying new equipment instead of optimizing skill sets, and they end up spending too much money, and it becomes a burden and makes losses unnecessarily. So we can, one, be independent project implementation supervisor and foresight for the institutions to ensure that they get value for money from the investments, and also ask the right questions from the vendors to ensure that they don't overprice. The second thing we have seen is we don't have good commercial lawyers, especially from internal financial institution level, where they write very bad service level agreements for enterprise IT. So we can also help provide technical review of the commercial contracts to ensure that the hidden costs of setup because of unnecessary promises are removed, so that you have a low cost of ownership of the system. For example, when a third party installs a system, you end up paying too much money every month, even when they are supposed to be a cost of the vendor. And so we can help review the contract, and then you are able to have more value savings and benefits, so that by encouraging the vendor to do their work. For some organizations, we have found, like say a service provider of giving you maybe fiber or data is delivering maybe 40% less of what is in the service level agreement. But because the company does not have the capabilities to monitor usage and how much data is supplied, they end up paying 100%. So we can be able to give you reports that are able to make sure that the service provider delivers as they promised. So these are just direct benefits from engaging with an independent cybersecurity support, which our partnership with the HLB Jim Roberts and Summit Consulting brings directly to AMFU, and also AMFU adds value to the industry, because then technology is no longer seen as a cost center, but a value enabler, where the man at risk is preserved. But most importantly, for the losses that have happened in banking, one of the biggest challenges has been there is one point of failure. Maybe the IT team internally and the service provider knows that the IT and everything is backed either at the head office or at another redundant site, offsite, or at the other site which they have access to. So what we have always encouraged organizations who are under our support, we also only looking at logging systems, Active Directory logs, network server, network tool devices logs, and of course the application server logs. we keep them independently on another offsite in real time. So meaning that even IT or the third party or any vendor doesn't have access. So in case of an incident, even if they try to cover their tracks by deleting them, there is another point of truth where we give you assurance that we will give you what exactly happened in your environment. Because even if you try to delete, you will not be able to access where we have backed independently those logs. And for the institutions where we have done this, even IT knows, there have been a significant reduction in even losses and attempts by insiders and not outsiders. Remember, almost 70% where losses have taken place and money has been lost in any financial institution, an insider has been involved. And that clarity of awareness that there is an independent firm which is local that is going to manage this, it solves. Because we have seen investigators from abroad for digital forensics, for example, they never solve the problem in Uganda. And that means that you just spend that money to go to insurance company to say that we investigated. But that increases your premium for the next period, which is also counterproductive. So if you want a solution, we want to confirm that we have a solution and you can be able to give better value to customers. In addition to what my colleagues have spoken to demonstrating that we have capability. And I would like to challenge any of the vendors that is going to come and give you services. Tell them to just make a report like this of doing an assessment and see how much they can give you, because that is the easiest way to monitor capability. Otherwise, somebody is going to say, to first ask you for money, then they go abroad, they look for the vendor. So you expose a lot of your internal capabilities and resources to foreigners whom you don't know. And obviously, you cannot put your security to people who are not regulated within the industry in which you operate. And these have been the biggest areas of exposure. So even as AMFU, in your ongoing trainings and briefings, you want to have people who have a track record, but also people who have local expertise, because you don't want, USA government will encourage their entrepreneurs to get solutions locally. For example, when I went to do some work in South Africa, they required me to have a local company registered in South Africa to be able to provide the service through it, not Summit coming direct and providing that service. The reason is, in case of any problem, they have a person they can sue under the local laws. But it is in Uganda where you have a member of AMFU goes abroad in India, gets a company which even is not registered in Uganda, and they begin exposing all the national resources. That is a breach of the data privacy and protection law. That is a breach of government sovereignty for the people of Uganda. It is because the laws are not covering them. So we do deliberate non-compliance, and somehow it is a big exposure. The same thing, you go to Kenya. You cannot go to Kenya now as a Ugandan firm and begin providing services to any institution unless you have a local firm you're working through. But in Uganda, you get somebody from Kenya comes in Uganda, they don't have a company registered under the laws of the country in which you operate or in which you are regulated, and you give them unnecessary exposure. I want you to know that the non-disclosures do not make sense if the laws under which those non-disclosures is not under your control, and the person is going to be outside. So that will require some POENA and so many things, and you have a reputation to protect because you don't want people to know that you have been breached. So this conversation should also be at the highest level, and that is the thinking, so that you are able to know in the long term what is the solution. So we can even work with your team in a period of maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 years, handhold them. If you are setting up a SOC, we support you to set up a SOC, to buy the infrastructure, so that you have total ownership from the beginning. Other than getting a vendor, set up things which you don't know. Even if they leave them in default, you cannot know. So you end up just being relying on them all the time, a smaller thing, relying on them. Even when you forget to put off the power, you call them, which is a bleeding for the organization. People work like donkeys, but the money doesn't come. It goes to the guys who are giving technology because they know that's how they eat. I beg to submit.
Doctor, you're muted.
Sorry, I forgot to put it back. Sorry. Yeah, so I was saying that what Mustafa has just said really underscores the reason why we went into a partnership, because HLB Jim Roberts, as you know, is an audit firm. We have very big strengths in terms of investigations, audits, forensics, and so forth. But then we knew that we needed a partner. We need a partner who's very, very detailed in terms of cyber and other detailed IT part of the work. And risk management. We haven't mentioned it, but Summit Consulting has developed a risk management application which can be used by organizations here. So we bring these capabilities together so that you don't only have competent auditors, but you also have competent experts in the area of cybersecurity and fraud awareness. So we believe that when we work together, Amphi, we can be able to handhold you and your members and make sure that we make the landscape of microfinance institutions extremely secure. And of course, a few months ago, we launched a report on the iShield 360, which I see already on the screen. I'm sure the experts will talk about it. And basically, this report was talking about the tool that we have to give you a defense system, which can be able to deter and detect and destroy any attacks that might be directed towards the organization. So I think at that point, I will take it back to the experts. If there are other comments you have picked in the audience, and there's something else you'd like to add, because I see a new screen on a new slide on the screen. Back to you, Godfrey and Daniel.
Thank you, Doctor. Now we are going to start off before we describe what's on the screen to first answer the questions. There's Mr. Joseph who asked two questions. One is, how do you come up with practical but affordable solutions for cybersecurity? Then the second one is, what role does artificial intelligence play in safeguarding microfinance institutions? So now, affordable and cybersecurity, I know it is the biggest challenge that most organizations find. That is the biggest model they are trying to fit within their financial data and records. So cybersecurity has become a common good, if I can call it that, because it has always been an IT problem. You relegate it to IT, that is their problem. They will fix those systems. It is up to them. Now, when things like ransomware or money being stolen comes in, you mostly see IT people who are being fired. And then when the data is lost or the organization doesn't even have the operational data anymore, it causes much more huge revenue nowadays than it used to be just money being stolen. So since cybersecurity is elevating to business challenge, a business level challenge, what we do, if you look at the screen, to answer the question of affordability, what is affordable for Pride Microfinance is probably not affordable for, let's say, or what is affordable for, let's say, Centenary Bank is not the same thing affordable for a smaller microfinance. So what we usually do is we have a value proposition, which goes, we do what's called a posture assessment and baselining. So what happens is that when you baseline, you go and understand what identity and access systems you have, how your network is set up, what are the security, performance, and functional areas, as well as monitoring gaps that you have to look at. Then there's what's called attack path, like the path the attack is going to take to cause damage within your systems. So once we do that baselining, then from there you determine what is affordable for you, because you now know where the areas of impact are, how to prioritize your spending. So it is not there is no direct answer, because most people want to hear that you go and buy product X, product Y, but it is very, very dependent, because cybersecurity, yes, if you don't understand how to leverage much of the expertise, for example, that is available to you, you will end up spending much of the money. And that's why most people do not want and see it as a cost area. Because if, for example, if you decide to go for an EDR, endpoint and detection system, it is going to cost you per device. If you have 1,000 devices, you are probably financially not better off buying 1,000 endpoints, because not all of them are critical. So that's why doing a baseline and understanding where are my critical assets, where are the crown jewels, where is my data stored, how do I need to protect it, and how is it affected? It allows you to determine, do I need a firewall? Do I need an endpoint detection and response system? Do I need a data loss and prevention capability? Then that's when you go into the tools and the cost area. Also, the return on investment in cybersecurity related capabilities is not going to directly reflect on your returns, but it will reflect on the efficiency of how you operate as an organization. It changes that way. So that's why you need to first baseline the whole environment and understand where is your center of gravity in terms of operations, in terms of security hotspots, in terms of attack path, in terms of, then you know that if I need identity and access, this is how I'm going to secure it. I have so many web applications that I need to put under single sign-on. So buying a single sign-on solution becomes affordable. Then from there, you have to determine, do I want to buy? Do I want to build? Buy versus build. For us, we are researchers and we are an original bunch. So we prefer both. We like to build capability and we like to buy where it is necessary to buy. So building sometimes takes that you take off open source projects and adapt them to a given environment. Though most organizations here have a very negative connotation about open source software, which is unfortunately sad reality, but almost 100% of the closed source or proprietary software that you buy comes out of open source software. If you did not know, much of them come from open source, and then if someone puts in more effort, that's when they charge you to buy it, because they put in development effort to make it work. So what we usually do, we do a buy versus build. There are different solutions. As I said, each organization is very different. What the association Amfield has and needs is different from what Pride Microfinance needs, and is different from what Centenary Bank needs, because they have different visions, they have different mission statements. All of these have to fit in. But the whole thing is, we usually do what's called that assessment, then we derive the path of affordability. So affordability is very dependent. Do you want to buy it? Do you want to build it? Build means you need expertise. Buy means you still need expertise, but to a lesser degree, because there's a lot of grunt work that has been done. So I hope that answers your question. The first one. Now, artificial intelligence is an overloaded term. I think all of you have heard about it. Every product you see now, at least somewhere, claims to have artificial intelligence. But the reality is that cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, there are few areas you can use artificial intelligence, but that requires you to have maturity of a certain level, because cybersecurity is an advanced field of technology. It requires you to understand your network very well, to understand your data, because much of what it does is to make sure it has been made more affordable because of a lot of data that is available and generated, as well as the computing power. So in areas where we see cybersecurity and AI becoming much better, especially for microfinance institution, is usually going to be monitoring, contextual monitoring, whereby you have a lot of data. You have data from Active Directory, you have data from your firewalls, you have data from your third party. Those who manage to collect them, the third party, the suppliers, they have their own system. They should be giving you logs. If they are not, you should go back and ask them to give you the logs so that you can monitor them and see them independently of them. So if you have data from all those sources and you don't have people to do the work, you can set up machine learning systems that help you to understand that data better, because machine learning is a subsection of artificial intelligence. So it's where much of cybersecurity helps. So instead of having 10 focused people to look at, one looks at network logs, you can create what's called the security data lake. And then you can correlate all these events through machine learning and then have more effective investigations while spending much better time somewhere else. From our practicality, that's the most impactful area. The rest is mostly, you're going to find that it is 90% marketing and 10% effective. So it is usually up to, after you baseline, you know what product, because it depends where you have to apply the artificial intelligence or machine learning as well. So there are certain areas that are hard to apply machine learning, but there are those which are easier to apply it. So it will help in machine learning to understand the security data that you have at scale, because if you have to look at network traffic every day, a minimum organization, we could say, that has around 20 people can generate almost 2 TB of network traffic per day. That's a lot of data for one person or two to go through, especially if that same person is the guy who does Active Directory, or the lady or the guy who does Active Directory and is the one who does the firewall. So it becomes that the roles are intertwined. So implementing effective machine learning to look at your security data lake, but you first need to have the security data lake in place. That's why I said it requires you to have maturity in order to leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning. So I hope that answers your question as well. Then I saw in the chat box, I think it was Fatima who said, let me see here.
We can now make that one the last question because it's already midday, and we prefer keeping time and then have continuous engagements over the months.
Okay, let me answer one which I saw from Stephen. I think it has more criticality. Fatima will answer. You'll allow me to answer only two and then we close. So Stephen says most of us rely on third party, especially core banking, mobile banking. What could be possible measures to avoid compromisation, and yet we need them to aggregate and configure both systems to communicate? Now, the same thing that is on your screen, you have to baseline. Even when, I think the CEO talked about it when he said, you need to review the contracts that you make with your third-party technology providers. For a case, I know you have serious issues with fintechs. Fintechs, all of you go into the agreement focused on delivering a function, a feature, and you just want to hit the market. And then you forget cybersecurity. Most fintechs haven't done security assessments. They have poor development practices. They leave much of their systems exposed. And then when you come to integrate with them and they get compromised, they do not want to take the blame for it. So you have to make sure that in whatever agreements first that you do, because it starts from there, that governance of application security and acquisition starts from there. How you acquire software, it has to include supply chain security and third-party security. You have to make sure that they provide recent assessments, compliance, whatever they can provide to you that gives you assurance in that you're going to bring them and make them part of your network. You make sure that these have them. Then they have to show you their vigilance, how they manage cybersecurity. And then you have to discuss how you share the responsibility for cybersecurity. I can give you an example. For example, cloud providers. Every cloud provider has they are certified to provide such capabilities. For example, AWS, Amazon, they will tell you where their responsibility ends and where yours starts, so that when something happens within their area of responsibility, you have legal liability to undertake it. Now, in case for, let's say, Stephen, from experience we have, you find that there is no legal path because everyone is in plausible deniability. This one says something else, the fintech or the supplier says something else. Because either the core banking had an issue and the vulnerability, then you did not put it in the contract, so they bill you differently to just add on security on top. So you have to make sure that before you acquire these systems, or if you can, go back and review them and put in the components. Whatever it costs you, that's the cost of security if you don't put it by default. Then the second thing, again, I'm going to send you to our value proposition on the screen, is you have to always make sure you assess. Software is accessible, systems are accessible, you will know the level of security. And once you feel it meets your acceptable risk profile, then you can accept to work and, understand how to integrate these systems all together. So that's the path that you have to take. It is not that you have to chase them away, but they have to compromise as well. And you have to meet somewhere in the middle, and you have to do it legally and then practically, technically by assessing. You need to have the capability to assess them, or they need to have the willingness to be assessed to understand that if I'm integrating my systems with yours, I need this minimum level of security that I am comfortable with, because I can handle the risk up to that level. Then the third thing about that is that, especially for vendors who don't live in the country, let's say outside the country, it is a pain point that they just delegate you to have an IT team to just manage the system, yet they are managing a black box. The vendors that you buy these systems, for example, we've seen loan management systems, which are even in the Netherlands and Australia. We've seen systems that are core banking that are within India and what. You need these people to bring that expertise home. The CEO talked about, you see how they, and this goes to the association, by the way, they need to make this a mandatory thing. If someone is going to provide you a core banking system or mobile banking, and they have a development team, they need to bring the knowledge into the organization, so that you are not relegated to just managing a black box within your environment, where the vendor will do much of the work and has all the expertise, while you are just logging in to check a few things and then that's it. It's a poor investment choice. You rather make them transfer the knowledge to you through service level agreements, legal agreements, and all of those things all together. So that's the path that has to be taken. Now, the last question, is going to be, what are the kind of security controls against phishing attacks? So the two most effective as of now, I'm going to say two, but there's one that is inherent, which makes it three, is training. Training is a hit and miss, but it depends. Though someone who is trained has more insight and understanding. So organizations should always strive to train their employees, and each level of role requires a different level of training. The way you train IT people is not the way you train the operations people, is not the way you train the Lego people or the CEOs and the board. So each level requires a different layer of training. So you have to put that into consideration. And then the other one is multi-factor authentication. We kindly advise you to stop deploying systems that do not support multi-factor authentication, because it's a critical thing. Modern compromises happen due to credentials. There are so many credentials that belong to all of you people from these organizations that are lying on the internet, that anyone who can search them and correlate them is going to compromise your environment. Even if you have the firewalls, even if you have the endpoint detection, someone is just going to log in as a normal employee, a normal third-party credential like manager, and then all they do is they will just do damage to you. So multi-factor authentication is a must. If you can't, then you do two-factor authentication, which is almost the same thing, just the different implementation. Then for modern applications, because now an average employee has to, even user, they have a mobile application on their phone, they have the internet application. The average person has around 3 or 4 applications they log in. Even you yourself, you log into Facebook, you log into this website, you log into your email. Those are already 3 minimum. So you're going to be forced mentally to use this one password to save time and to feel more convenient, not to have a mental toll. So what single sign-on does, for organizations and enterprise applications, you put them under an identity platform that you create users and manage them in one place, and then you can assign them access to different applications. Even when you have a breach, it's easy to just revoke access in one place than when you have 10 places where you have to go and force the user to change the password every single time. So three levels of protection, training, multi-factor authentication, and then single sign-on. So that encompasses fighting phishing and social engineering at large. So I think that's it. Probably one question that was not answered. It's about certifications for cloud security engineering, but this depends. Each cloud provider has their own certifications. So what you find in Microsoft is different from what you find. They are different, and they have these at their respective clouds. We can dialogue further due to the impact of time. So I think that answers all of the questions, and we thank you for your time. I'm going to hand over to my colleague to proceed from there.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, the team
Yes,
online.
go ahead, Mustafa. And go ahead.
No, you can come in, Doctor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mustafa is out now. All right. Thank you. I don't know whether I still have Jackie. Jackie, are you there? I think she's not there. What about Robert? I saw Robert of Amphew. At some point, I saw Robert. Okay, no worries. But all I can say is that thank you. It has been a very, very engaging discussion. Thank you for the very many questions, very many comments that came through. We thank you for your participation. We are willing to work with you. We are ready to work with you. Let's explore areas of collaboration. And for the specific microfinance institutions, you can reach out to us. I had given our contacts on the chat. We are going to be sharing our profiles with you through the email. We'll share this presentation, the slides, we'll share the recording, and our offices are open. Either you come to HLB Jim Roberts at Buganda Road, just next to the Chief Magistrate's Court, where the GT Bank is. And also you can go to Ntinda Complex, where you'll get Summit Consulting. We're here to work with you. Maybe to invite you also, those who might have interest in NGOs, we'll be having a similar conversation with the NGO forum next week on Thursday. And we'll be going through the details of the exposure of non-government organizations. If you're involved in any way with an NGO, I will be sharing the recordings. You can still sharing the registration details, and the flyers will be shared with you on your emails, which you've used for logging onto this. So if you have interest in NGOs, I know most of us can be working, but also you belong to a certain NGO. Please, you're welcome to join us on Thursday. We shall be talking about cybersecurity for the NGOs. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on. It has been a great experience interacting with you, and we wish you the very best. And HLB Jim Roberts and Summit Consulting are available. We will continue to work with you in the next few months, few years, to make sure we improve the security and fraud awareness landscape in this country and in the region as well. Thank you so much, and God bless you. Thank you, and bye-bye. End. End meeting. I can end it.